For the cell analogy project, I was going to compare to the beehive. For the project, I decided to compare the cell to the beehive. Throughout the project, we'll be looking at this bee colony of bees, and we'll be picking apart specific things of that and comparing it to parts of the cell. As you can see here, this is the colony we'll be looking at today. So first, before it appears on the screen in a few seconds, we're going to be talking about the queen bee. And the queen bee is often compared to as the nucleus in the cell. That's what I compared it to, at least. And I said that because the queen bee has and holds all the genetic information and the hereditary information in the same way the nucleus holds the DNA and RNA, which is necessary for the coding and the basic instructions for the cells. The queen bee is often regarded as the control center. Why? Because it directs the actions of the hive in the same sense that the nucleus directs the actions of the cell, what the organelles need to do, for example. Around the queen bee, we see the worker bees. These worker bees work to produce honey in the same way that ribosomes work to produce proteins. That is what I compared both of them to. Ribosomes produce these proteins in this process called protein synthesis, and these worker bees just produce honey based on some things they will get from the forage bees, which I will talk more about later. After this, we now get a shot of the drone bees, right? And these drone bees I compared to as centrioles. Why? Because the drone bees are so necessary for this reproduction in the hive. They're the only bees that will mate with the queen, and their information will be passed on to the offspring. The centrioles are also very crucial because these are the organelles that will have the impact on the spindle fibers when the cell is splitting or in cell division. They are very crucial to the spindle fibers, I have said, but when the cell splits itself, that is when the centriole becomes a big part. Now we see the pollen and nectar appearing on the right side of the screen. That's something that is so important, and I compared that to mitochondria because it's such an important part of the energy that the bees will have. In the same sense, the mitochondria is referred to as the powerhouse of the cell because of its relation with energy and its moving energy throughout the cell as this honey is moved throughout the hive to give that energy. Now we move on to the honey again. As you can see, they're eating out of the honey, but it's more used for, and I use it for as comparable to the cytoplasm, because it is a liquid substance that is holding up the hive, like a cytoplasm being the liquid that fills up the cell and still gives it that shape. Also, talking about shape, we see the honeycomb shape. That is something that is comparable to the cytoskeleton. And we say this because the cytoskeleton is the structure that will hold up the cell, and the honeycomb is a structure that will hold up the beehive. We now see the storage cells also in action. Those storage cells that we see right now at this shot are comparable to the small vacuole. These storage cells will hold the pollen and nectar, and in the small vacuole in the cell, they hold water, salt, proteins, and carbohydrates. But in both examples, they're holding materials that are necessary for the cell to just carry out its everyday processes, whether it's transporting energy or packing up proteins. Now we will see the Golgi apparatus. We see these wax bees all around the storage cells. The Golgi apparatus is exactly like these wax bees because it's putting the final touches on the nectar that is being fermented by covering it with a layer of wax. And the Golgi apparatus also puts the final touches on something else. It puts it on proteins, and these final touches is what made it both of these things comparable. After this, you will soon see the forager bees, and I compared those forager bees to the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. Now we see the forager bees, and the reason of comparing these two was because the smooth endoplasmic reticulum is a lot like the honey production and the transport that we will see here. It transports things like hormones and lipids and produces that in the same way that these foraging bees are producing the honey for the hive and transporting it all around to where it needs to go. We will now see the rough ER, or the rough endoplasmic reticulum, which is the transfer of the honey going from the plants, from the foraging bees, into the hive itself. But something interesting you should see is the guard bees outside that are just waiting and making sure that no invader enters the hive. That is comparable to the cell membrane because it make sure that only some molecules will come into the cell and some will be left out. Then we see the lysosome, and these are the undertaker bees, as you can see, engaging in this sort of combat kind of thing, and they're engaging in it to make sure that there is no intruder entering the cell, and uh, there's no invader entering the hive. We can see here that's what the lysosome does. It takes apart the waste and it removes that, so nothing becomes hazardous in the cell.